Joining us today is our friend and yours, Joel Evans. He is our resident Copilot expert. He's the gentleman that tried to get me to buy Copilot, and I actually did. I worked with it heavily for about 6.5 days and then just couldn't take it anymore and gave up. Went back to ChatGPT, and based on a recommendation from someone else we've had a podcast with, Andy Rossick, I tried Claude and I have become an incredible Claude fan. I think it does some fantastic work, but none of them do the one thing that I was really hoping Copilot would do, and that's working with spreadsheets. None of them do it well. I wanted to get a quick call together because there's been Copilots back in the news. Microsoft announced Copilot, which is their upgraded version, Wave
They'll
2.
change the name. Don't
Sorry.
worry. Right
So
now it's Wave 2,
I'm sure it'll become Copilot Pro, and then it'll
365.
become,
Yeah, yeah.
Copilot
Yeah.
SD and
The usuals, premium.
Copilot
It'll go
365.
through
Yep.
the paces.
But so what we wanted to do is have a quick conversation with the man that knows this better than anybody
Thank
else.
you.
And that would be Joel. So, Joel, the things that I ran into with Copilot were the in-app versions were remarkably unskillful. I'm trying to think of a better word for that,
Mhm.
but they did not do much. It kept saying, well, I could do some formatting or I could do this thing, but I can't reword or I can't look this up or I can't do this other thing. And I kept thinking, but I can do that with ChatGPT or I can do that with Claude by uploading something and asking it to do this work. What's the point of having Copilot in the document itself in Word
Mhm.
or in PowerPoint if it can't do anything? And I thought, and you gave me the tip, well, try
Mhm.
using the Copilot on the web.
Mhm.
And that was much more fully functional. But to me, it was a head scratcher to say, well, why are they in the actual software, the
Mhm.
PowerPoint, the Word, the whatever, if they are not very capable?
Sure.
But so
So
those were my
we'll
challenges.
leave Excel out of this for now. It's a separate animal, and actually something that they did a big announcement around what they're doing with it in Wave 2. But I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing, and again,
Mhm.
I think I haven't verified this, but I think it's the nature of big companies where you've got different product managers. So my guess would be that there's a different product folks on copilot.microsoft.com compared to the ones that are owning Word, Excel,
Mhm.
PowerPoint. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'd love it to do this. And they're like, okay, can't get it in right now, to be continued. But in the meantime, the folks doing copilot.microsoft.com are like, well, I could do this. So that would be my guess, just based on what I've seen in the past. I could be very wrong. But what I found
Mhm.
intriguing, well, first of all, there's a bunch of workarounds, and I think this is the nature of these evolving platforms. But for example, one of the
Sure.
demos that I showed off in a previous webinar was the idea of starting a presentation from, a Word doc as a source. And you go and you try to find it, and inside the wizard of PowerPoint, it's not finding the document that you want it to find, and you get frustrated and you go, I don't understand what I just paid for. And one of the workarounds there is if you can actually see the document and it's open, then you go to the share button and grab the URL, which you would never want to memorize, of what it is, copy it, and paste that
Mhm.
into your, blank presentation where it says create a presentation starting with file. You do slash, and then you paste that, giant string file name, and ta-da, problem solved. So I think there's some little things like that which are only going to get better, right? I think there's 1,000 reasons why it may not be able to see the document that you created already. But the nice thing is if you can see it in front of you, just copy that URL, drop it in, and everybody wins. Similarly to the challenges you've had in Word, if you highlight a paragraph at a time, you'll see your little Copilot, icon show up, and it gives you a chance to rewrite it that way. That is really just going to become more trial and error. And I
Mhm.
think that's also a lot of stuff that got improved with Wave 2. And Wave 2 is not like an upgrade you have to do. It's basically a new release so there's a lot of really cool stuff that came in Wave 2 that is now yours, to enjoy, either client or web based. but I've seen a lot of my frustrations that I've sort of, been capturing as I work with executives one on one and train them on how to use it. And I'm like, okay, well, that was an interesting challenge that we weren't expecting. So let me see how I can, get past that. Is that a flaw in the software? Is that a flaw in the UI temporarily, which hopefully will go away? So that's what I've seen on the Word side and on the PowerPoint side. And what I would say also, and we'll get to Excel in a second. And what I would also say though is when you really what I've seen the most, and this isn't even just me, this is me now working with other folks, is the speed at which you can take your thoughts or your ideas and make them into, presentable outcomes like a PowerPoint slide is really like a huge productivity gain. But some of the other things I've seen is someone needed to had to have a sit down with an employee, and there were a whole bunch of back and forth chats around, the positives and negatives of this person. And instead of going through and combing through and trying to isolate all the different pieces, it was using the magic of Copilot either by highlighting it all and dropping it into Copilot and saying, "Make me a summary," or specifically using Copilot inside of, let's say, a chat session or this session or that session, or even going a step out and saying, Copilot.microsoft.com, show me all the communication I've had with Paul and summarize it for me in a table with dates. And I mean, that's you've just saved hours of investigation. Um,
Hmm.
and then, last but not least, and then we can get into the new cool stuff that they announced, but last but not least is what I've said previously is try and try again. And I think, Paul, you were alluding to this in a previous conversation. Sometimes it just says, I can't do it. And you go, well, try again. And then it goes, oh, hey, yeah, oh, you're right. Okay, I guess I can do it. And I think we've all been, we've all
Hmm.
been trained to that just in a different way. Like when I'm waiting for a page to load in my browser, sometimes it's faster to just click stop and reload, right? And then it magically, comes up. Or when you're trying to well, you don't want to double hit submit on things because then you'll probably get double charged. But yeah, you get the idea. Sometimes these
Yep.
things just hiccup and you got to go, you sure?
Hmm.
Come on. Or that's not true. And, to your point, I was
Hmm.
playing a lot and I did a quick YouTube video playing with Claude AI, and it was the same thing where it was like, make this button blue. And it's like, here, okay, I made it blue and here's how I did it. And it shows the code of how it did it. And it still wasn't blue. And I'm like, so all I wrote was, it's still not blue. And I said, oh, hey, sorry about that. I'll try again. Tries a totally different approach. And I'm like, nope, still not blue. And he goes, all right, fine, we're going to do it this other way, which I wasn't going to do, basically, right? So it's like you're arguing with a developer. So you have to wonder if the new version of ChatGPT, with its quote unquote thinking and reasoning, maybe will not misfire. Two out of the three shots, but it'll be
Well, to that point specifically, I use both ChatGPT and Claude a lot. I think Claude is a more robust tool. I think it can do a lot better work with compositions and kind of helping me edit some content that we're creating. But one of the things that I really find very frustrating with ChatGPT is that it
uh
promises things and it won't deliver.
oh, I
It'll
know,
say, "Yep, I'm working in the background
yeah.
on that project. Come back in 2 hours and I'll be able to have this done."
Or not even come back in
It
2 hours.
never
I'm working on
does.
it. It's like, as a technical guy, I just want to see a list of all these jobs that may or may not be running and give me the ability to cancel them because I can't
Mhm.
imagine it's still working on something I put in there 2 weeks ago.
I well, it's I did a sample or a test of that myself, and I went in and I said, "Okay, well, what are the things that are making this very difficult for you, this task difficult?" "Well, it's this and this and this are really
Mhm.
challenging." I said, "Okay, well, get rid of 2 of those and do these other steps first." "Great, that's so fantastic. Thank
That
you
was
so
in
much. That should
ChatGPT?
take me only minutes now."
Yeah,
Yes.
interesting.
Didn't change a thing. It still couldn't do it. And I kept saying, okay. And it said, I'm making, and then I'd come back in a while and it'd say, I'm making good progress, but I'm still going to need a little more time. And I said, okay, well, show me what what you've been able to work on since the last time we chatted. And it basically has nothing. I would rather have it say, I can't do that like Copilot did than have it say,
Mhm.
sure, and then waste the time
Yeah.
that
I've
I
had that in
have been running
Copilot as well.
into
That's what I'm
with,
saying. I wish I could
uh,
just look and see what my random, you know,
okay.
cron jobs might be floating out there in nowhere land where it's like crunching numbers and things that I don't care about anymore. Or if it just says, "Yeah, I'm working on it," and then eventually it
Mhm.
just abandons it behind the scenes and doesn't report back, which would be my guess, right? It's not gonna keep running our
Yep.
processes
Yeah.
in hopes.
And
But
they
it
should rebrand it and just call it Chat GPT for government, and then make a lot call it, "This is our feature."
and you get to yeah. Or
Well
for
said.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the mayor that made that
just
comment.
give me a mark every time it's still working on it
Mhm.
every hour because 'cause I'm still
Yeah.
billing, still working on that.
Sure.
I gave it to one of my other resources to work on.
And it's all billable hours. So, one of the things we were talking about
Mhm.
is Excel is a real challenge for these models. And I know that I don't think everything's fixed. I think there's some process improvements that are coming there. But do you want to touch base on why Excel is such a problem or just jump
Yeah, so I'm not
into
sure why it
Copilot
was such a
2.0?
problem. I think the examples that I've tried and the examples I've seen online do a really nice job, but it's almost like Google Docs compared to, Word, right? It's like the very basic level of Excel work, for lack of a better way of putting it. So what I'm intrigued
Mhm.
by, and I will use this as a segue point, what I'm intrigued about Wave 2 is, and I'm sure we're gonna see, so first of all, they moved Copilot and Excel to generally available, which, instead of preview, so maybe that means that there's some enhancements there. But they're now also saying it's, Copilot and Excel with Python, and I think that that's gonna be the way that they're sorta solving the problem. So you'll now be able to do your prompts, and then it'll show you the Python code that it used to generate the result. And I think just the fact that it's gone to that
Mhm.
level likely means that there's a lot more, going on behind the scenes, but now they're also exposing it to you so that you can then make your own tweaks and do the more complex.
Yes, because we all know
It's
Yeah,
a
Python.
very
that's
natural.
right.
It's like
Sure.
speaking English. But what's
That's when you have Claude
exactly.
open so you can write it in Python,
Yep.
then
But I
pop it
think
back into Copilot.
what's intriguing, and I think the direction you probably have to go in, I think it probably has to do more with prompt engineering wizardry than anything else. Because the videos that I found were actually put out by people that work at Microsoft, not playing with the one with Python, but playing with regular Excel. And it's little nuances. So again, similar to my workaround that I told you about to generate your PowerPoint, and I think those will only get better over time. Like when Copilot first came out and even
Mhm.
ChatGPT, you had to be very specific with your prompts. But now one of the first things you'll see in Copilot is the suggested, next prompts, so to speak. And another thing that I haven't gotten in the habit of doing, but I probably should, is you can also ask Copilot or ChatGPT if there's anything I should do to make my prompts better, and then sort of learn from that if you want
Mhm.
to teach, turn that into a teaching moment for yourself. It's like it's trying to teach you how to talk to it to get better results for what you're looking for, which I think
Mhm.
is where we're going.
Absolutely, and I think it's something that I've found to be a very valuable tool, is doing that exact thing, working with one of the tools, ChatGPT, Claude, whomever, and going through a
Yep,
series of, "Well, no, that's not quite what I wanted. Here's what can you go try this? Well, no, that's not quite it. Can you try that?" At the end of it, saying, "What would
yep,
have been the right prompt to have asked
yep.
to get to this end state that we're in?" And
So
that's
if you
been
play in
exceptionally helpful.
Copilot.Microsoft, and anybody can do it, you don't even need to have paid for it. But if you play with it this way, to your point, you can, without even asking it, you can see. So if I say, take this data set and, plot it from smallest to largest, it will then show you the prompt that it's actually feeding in to the large language model to then
Mhm.
spit out the result that it thinks you were asking for, compared to the way that we phrased it, because we all want to talk natural language in hopes of getting the results we want. But you know what, I'm so used to not talking natural language when it comes to working with technology, that just show me my, like, I was taking it into the Wayback Time Machine, but Palm Pilot was hugely successful with handwriting recognition because it didn't try to learn your handwriting. It had you learn its handwriting, which I was 100% on board with because the efficiencies gained. by being able to write into the device that way. So I feel like
Mhm.
we're at that same, evolution point. It's like I will happily become a much better prompt engineer to be more efficient than go through the 3 or 4 tries to get the data that get what I was hoping for out of the system.
I had a question for you. The attraction, obviously, for all of us is the integration with Office.
Mhm.
That's what really brings us to Copilot. What about some of the other Microsoft products that they have? Or have they announced with the Wave 2, anything else that it integrates with well besides Office?
Oh, you're, like, teeing me up perfectly. Yeah, so what I really like about Wave 2 is they've got this concept of agents, which everybody has. Salesforce has their Agent Force, and they announced it at Dreamforce and showed off all their stuff, but I think I'm looking at my quick notes here because I tried to even before this podcast, I was trying to figure out if someone came to me and said, "What do you really like about the new stuff?" But it's done some really nice integration with OneDrive and SharePoint, and the concept of the Copilot agents is one thing. And I'll start with your first question, and then I'll go beyond that. So its integration with SharePoint is really cool. So you can do Copilot agents and basically turning every SharePoint site into an agent when you think about it that way. And then you can share that into teams. So let's say the three of us were collaborating on something and we said, all right, well, we know that it's probably these 10 documents or this SharePoint site of information or this SharePoint location of information. I can basically build an agent by literally just clicking on all the different documents that I want to include. And then I can share that into teams for us to interact with. And now instead of ripping through 10 or 100 documents to try and find the answer, it's actually an interactive chatbot like it would be, ChatGPT or Copilot surfacing the information that I'm looking for, which is pretty wild. And once you do that inside of Teams, you can add the agent as if it's like a human. So you can say, "Agent, is this really the right information based on the information you have access to?" And cite your source, right? And it's like, so it's really pretty amazing that way because now everybody could pretty much build an agent and have their own sort of copilot going in their workday. And then, overall, stepping even outside of SharePoint, the idea of building an agent is now, and Salesforce does the same thing with your Salesforce stuff, but it's literally thinking about, okay, what's the business process in a natural language, typing what you want it to be, and then through a quick little wizard, click, click, click. Oh, I'd like to, do this and that. It'll prompt you. You click whatever the repetitive task might be, or you can even go in and customize and add additional data sources, et cetera. So along the same way that you would do it by starting inside of SharePoint and checking off what you want, you can do it outside of SharePoint and say, I want to create an agent that, I don't even know. I want to create an agent that checks my calendar to see if I'm available on every Friday for the rest of the year, and then checks against our time accounting system to see if I have enough PTO days to do it. And if I do, then put the request in for me. And that may seem like the most insane thing to have ever crafted, but if you start stepping through, depending on the data sources you have access to and its abilities, and I mean, it's like that's just the beginning of the really, really cool stuff that can happen. And then they pushed a bunch of new updates into Outlook as well as Outlook Mobile. So Outlook now will do sort of that prioritize my inbox, which was sort of happening behind the scenes. Some sort of Microsoft wizardry is now becoming a little bit more inside of your own control. So you can prioritize by Copilot and then start teaching Copilot so that Copilot learns what you think is a priority going forward. And you can even see summaries of your email thread, which we all know, especially in corporate America or government, there's like 3,000 people on an email thread and you're like, I don't even know where to begin anymore. And then you basically can just go summary and then decide, where you might want to dive in, which I think is pretty amazing. And then they thought a little bit more about mobile, not as much as they should, but a little bit more. So now you can, compose emails, using Copilot like you can when you're at your, desktop. You can now do that with mobile. But I also am still using like Grammarly Pro on my iPhone to sort of, keep myself sounding relatively not as impatient as I may sound if I'm answering from a mobile device. I'll put it that way. Curt is probably the better word, right? I don't want to sound curt.
Nice.
I want
Nice.
to sound personable.
I didn't know that they could do that. That's outstanding. I mean, Grammarly I've used before, and I always knew it was great for editing and making it sound better, but I didn't realize you could make
Oh
it
yeah.
sound more
Yeah, they all do
personable.
their own sort
That's
of
interesting.
style now, just like Copilot does, where you click the slider and then, you know, make it sound like a poem or, whatever else. But
Mhm.
Grammarly will do that on your desktop as well as on your mobile device. And I tend to not leave it as default on my mobile. I like the regular typing, and then I actually make a special effort to go and select the Grammarly keyboard after I've typed my thing, and then let Grammarly make some suggestions, because I don't like losing my own style inside the conversation. So those are
Interesting. But does it have
I
a
don't
talk
think
like a
so.
pirate way?
R
Could have been
R
useful.
Future
I don't know.
enhancements.
And then last but not least on the Copilot front, and there's so much. I did a quick little thing on LinkedIn about it, but there's so much to cover. But one thing, as in typical Microsoft fashion, they created another product called Copilot Pages, which really feels like it's what Microsoft Word should be when you want to start playing with Copilot. But the idea is that I could start something at copilot.microsoft.com, do my search or whatever the case may be. Then I can actually, so let's say we were all talking about something. Maybe it's let's say it's the origination of the World Wide Web or something, right? So I start a quick query, a quick prompt inside of copilot.microsoft.com. It gives me an answer. I then can invite you guys into this new, page, basically, that I've now created, and we are interacting with Copilot and ourselves at the same time, and doing this whole like collaborative cool thing. Again, it feels like that should be something that is like native in Word, but it's like almost like a distilled version of Word. So you got to just wonder: is there different product people building out different pieces of functionality to solve what they think
Mhm.
is a need?
I gotta say, this sounds an awful lot like
Yeah.
Intune 4 or 5 years ago, where it had all of these great ideas of way it could take over your unified endpoint management. It could do these other pieces,
Hmm.
but none of them it did perfectly, and it didn't integrate very well, and there were gaps, but it has gotten significantly better to the point where a lot of companies are starting
Hmm.
to say, "Well, I don't need any of these other tools. I can just use Intune. It's secure enough, it's checked all the right boxes, and it's all part of the Microsoft suite of services I want." So it's an
Yeah.
evolution. So I'm assuming Copilot will do the same thing and will start getting better and better and better, because the chance to be able to say, "All right, look, you have access to my OneDrive, so you know every document I've created for the company, you know every email I've sent out, you know all of that data specific to me and this business."
And if
That's an
you, yeah,
incredibly valuable
well,
tool.
I was just going to say, I mean,
Whereas
to your
with
point, if you think
yeah, go
about
ahead.
it, Copilot seems like it's a big investment, right? It's $30 a month, but not $30 a month. It's $30 a month that you pay for a year in advance. The speed at which
Mhm.
the innovations and the releases and the improvements are coming out, I guess that's what you bought into, right? So if you've bought into this as something, you're dedicated to it for at least a year, but it's nice that it's not sitting stagnant. It
Mhm.
actually is continuing to improve with like newer functionality. Like the SharePoint one, I haven't used the agent yet for SharePoint, but I really, really could have used that for two giant projects in the last, like, well, a few months before I got Copilot. I'll put it that way. And even when I had Copilot, I was continuing to
Well,
use copilot.microsoft.com, but the work tab, and letting it rip through whatever I had, sitting across, like to your point, sitting across my index, or my Microsoft graph as it is. But now with SharePoint, it's not just my Microsoft graph. It's deciding, maybe it's mine, Paul's, and Joe's, and we're all collaborating on something together. So somebody's listening. They're definitely making our work life, more streamlined as time goes on, which is the whole purpose of all this.
Well, you talked a little bit about agents, and a lot of people may not know what those are. Maybe you could give us a little overview. It might be a nice topic for us to dive into on a separate podcast to go into detail.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd love to. And to your point, I think I always do better once I've actually completely thrown myself into it. So I'll take as a task before we meet again to actually build a couple of agents that I work into my workflow, which would be pretty cool. So I'll tell you about the agents, and then funny enough, I was talking to someone else about the agents, and he was telling me how they were already using like Power Automate and some other things to do things that the agents will actually make easier now. So the agent at its top level allows you to execute business processes, create like prompt and response type automated repetitive tasks. They'll work on their own. So once you get them set up, they'll just kind of do their thing. And really, let me distill it down to its essence, right? So it's you could start Agent Builder, and really anybody with Copilot can now do this. And you start with, and they try to make it very straightforward. Describe, right? So tell it what you actually want it to do, and then configure. So at that scenario, decide what else you need it to connect to. So to my example before, I need to create an agent that looks for available time on my calendar to book PTO, right? So that would be what my description would be. Based on what sources it thinks I have access to, it's probably going to connect to those right off the bat. I then have the ability to go in and configure and add additional sources if I need to. And then I can even customize the actions. So maybe it's like that generic one I just said, find available time. If it says, okay, I found a bunch of available time, well, one of my customized actions might be that I want the ability to choose, which days, as opposed to saying just book on a Friday or whatever the case is. And then again, customizing its knowledge so you can continue to make it smarter by going in and configuring and adding more and more data sources. Now, the what I just described is actually stuff you could do with, Power Automate and other tools like that, but that's not for everybody to come in and play with. Whereas this is really supposed to be anybody who thinks they can build an agent should just start building. And they try to make it like, okay, describe what you want it to do. It's going to, on its own, try and configure and connect to whatever data sources it thinks it needs to execute on what you need. But then it does give you the ability very easily to go, nope, configure, customize, let me fix all this up. And then, kind of click go from there. So I think there's a lot of power there.
It sure sounds it. And one of the things that I was thinking of is I'm trying to wrap my brain around like what are some of
Hmm.
the things that I would want an agent to do. One of the first things I thought of was have the agent trained so that it looks at my calendar 1 week out and
Exactly.
provides me a briefing document on each of the meetings. Here's the conversations you've had with this person. A summary of their LinkedIn profile, whatever. If whatever you can get access to as information,
Hmm.
have that automatically served up to you would be very interesting. Is that
100%.
something
And
that you think
I
this would be
love
able
that
to
you
do?
gave that as an example because one of the prompts that I try to remember to use, again, try to remember, but if an agent was doing it for me, I wouldn't have to try to remember, is on a Friday. When every time I try to keep my
Mhm.
Fridays light so I can clean up the week. And I have a prompt that I would usually run in Copilot in work mode that's like, go through my inbox and give me a list in a table format with a summary of anything that you think still requires my attention and what the appropriate next steps would be. So here I am thinking I was like
Hmm.
Mr. Wizard with this amazing prompt. And then I found again one of these videos by one of the Microsoft people, and they have it in the Copilot Lab area, which we can, link to in show notes. I don't know if they have this extensive one, but it was like a huge, like hugely long prompt. So here I was thinking I was clever. Instead, this guy had the prompt that said, break it up by paragraph. And I want the first paragraph to be this and the second paragraph to be this. So it was a summary, and then it was like detailed next steps, and then it was looking at his calendar to see whether or not he would have time to like just crazy stuff that was now okay. Copilot, like here, just go do this magic for me without me having to think anymore. And again, in my examples, where I've said go in my inbox, look for this, do that, I would say it's not 100% accurate, but the time it's saving me is huge. So even if I go and assume and act on whatever it just told me to do, and then I still go back and look, now at least, it took a big chunk of that away. Oh, exactly.
Mhm.
Well,
It's the
and
old
going
80
back
20
to, I
rule.
said before agents existed, the story that I heard that someone's been doing for a long time is they actually have it go through every one of their Teams channels and chats. And over the weekend, like, so once a week, it basically, they run that through, ChatGPT and create summaries with reference points. So there's so much activity going on in their company across all their different clients, across all their different teams and chats, that anything they have access to, they basically have nice little summary that they can read so that they can be brought up to speed on whatever they may have missed. And if they have the need to go in and dive in and get the details, it's either one click away or, they know where it lives and they can go back to the source. So again, I think all these things are going full circle back to the very first conversation we had on this is before you do anything in your workday, probably in our personal lives soon enough, but in our workday, just go, how can AI help me with that? And then it's a shift,
Mhm.
right? It's 100% a shift to how we're used to working. But if we do take that step back and go, all right, how can AI help me? Like, why am I spending all of my time doing this
Mhm.
when I already know the power of AI, where it can help?
It has made it possible for Joe and I to run this small business
Yes.
so much easier. There's so much content we've been able to get ideas for, and so much of the back end business process, and so many things that would normally have
Hmm.
taken an incredible amount of time to put together. AI has been that tool
Hmm.
to help us do it faster. We
Yeah.
still have to work with it. It is all still coming from our intelligence or our experience or whatever. We do have to do a lot of work with it, but it has taken
Yeah.
that 80% of the bulk of that effort off of our plate. There's no doubt in my mind
Yep.
we would not
Yeah,
be
I
as
got to
far as we are
practice
as an
what I preach. As
organization
I
without
told
it.
you, like, as
So
I'm sitting
I
here telling you about this magical prompt that I run on Fridays, I'm like, it's almost 12:30 Eastern time on a Friday, and I have not run that prompt, and my inbox is overflowing, and I also still going across
Mhm.
a variety of we could have a whole separate conversation, and we should have a podcast and maybe bring a bunch of the other guys from the team on to talk about what their daily toolkit is, because I will go through my inbox and then I
Mhm.
will create a task in Asana because I used to do it in To Do or I used to do it in Planner and it wasn't as efficient. So I moved back to Asana again. But now that I'm all in on Copilot, I should just migrate my world back to Planner because from Copilot, I could probably, if Copilot won't do it for me, I could write an agent that would let me, have it automatically create the to dos or the appointments or whatever else. So,
Exactly.
Well, I think Joe said it best. I think, we'll come back for another swing at this, and you can talk to us about how those agents were completed, how they're doing. You got them in place, and here's the experience that you've had. I'm really excited about it. This has been great. You have kept me from permanently
I
getting
saved
rid
one.
of
I saved one
Copilot out of my
license.
life. You did? Well,
Right.
I am very much a Claude fan, so I'll probably stay there for a little while, but this is really interesting, and I do believe in the long-term vision that having access to all of that information that is so pertinent to just your business is really valuable, so I have a feeling I will be going
Yeah.
back at some point, but for
Okay.
now, I'm very happy with what I can
Well,
do
and as
with
I
the
said,
tools
I'm
I have, and,
I'm learning a lot
look forward
from
to
my
having the next
one-on-one
conversation.
coaching sessions with the executives because I'm learning. We start with,
Mhm.
let's do a day in your life, and then I understand what their business processes are and what their flows are, and they're, they're remarkably efficient. So it's not a matter of I'm drowning and I really need help here. They're very efficient and have gotten very used to doing whatever it is they're doing, but you start understanding that there are things on their task list that are pains and they're not going to them yet because they traditionally are a pain to do. And instead, I said, well, let's get started
Mhm.
on that. It's like, well, and then let's do this and let's do that. And within 5 minutes, we were 70% done with something that was out there as a pain point and probably would have, without AI, taken many, many hours across a couple of different days. And now you're 70% or 80% done. Your 80/20 is like spot on. We're close enough, right? But you're 80%
Right.
done in minutes
Mhm.
instead of 20% done in hours. That's huge.
It is, it is.
I should coin
It's
that. I like
exciting
that.
time.
80%. Someone else must have said that before. 80% done in minutes
Yeah.
instead of 20% done in. If not, TM, grabbing that right now. You heard it here first. First use.
All right, you go. Absolutely. Well, on that note,
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
we'll talk again
All
soon.
right. Thanks, Joel.
MTMG. guidance that empowers.